My name is Doug Rhodes. I'm chapter president of Sigma Xi here on campus. I appreciate you all coming out on Dead Day, but I think the subject is an important one. I am going to announce that I am recording this, so the video will be, if Steve agrees, put up on the Sigma Xi website so that you can share the video with your colleagues and friends, maybe a TV producer or somebody like that.
Fine with me.
I don't think Steve is bashful about wanting to talk about this subject.
Right.
So it gives me great pleasure to introduce my good friend Steve Boss, who is going to lead our discussion today about the case for a gun-free campus. Thank you all.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming here too on a kind of a dismal day at the end of the semester here. But I do want to make a couple of comments before I get started too. First of all, when Doug asked me to do this last year or last summer, we tried to pick a date, and I said, well, toward the end of the semester is better, and he just threw out this date to me. I said, okay, that's fine. And I didn't realize until after we already set this that this is actually quite a significant date, because this is the eve of the anniversary of the mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School, Newtown, Connecticut. Tomorrow is the first anniversary of that event. And for those of you who live in Fayetteville here, somewhere in the city, between 8:35 and 8:40 a.m. tomorrow morning, you may hear church bells ringing around the city, and those bells will be tolling in remembrance of the victims of Sandy Hook and victims of gun violence really all over the country. And our town connects directly to the Sandy Hook tragedy because one of the young victims, one of the first grade victims, has family members in this town here. So I feel very honored and privileged to kind of be talking on this day just by happenstance, really. But I do want to share with you some information that I've uncovered over the last 8 or 9 months or so. And I got involved in this. First of all, full disclosure here, I'm not a social scientist. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not an expert in criminal justice or crime in any way. I'm a physical scientist by training. And I only got involved in this research project as a consequence really of Sandy Hook. I mean, for me, that was a line in the sand. I find that intolerable in our society. But we did have also, you I'm sure are quite aware, a vigorous debate last February regarding a bill that has now been enacted by the Arkansas General Assembly to permit concealed carry for faculty and staff on colleges all around the state of Arkansas. And through the activity of quite a few people who opposed this, we were successful getting an amendment added to that bill that allows colleges and universities to opt out of the law on an annual basis. And I am very pleased to say that every single college in the state, every 4-year college, every 2-year college, every technical institute in the state actually opted out last year. So this is kind of a useless law that we can all ignore as long as we vote to ignore it every single year. Okay? And that's going to be really a challenge going forward. But during that time when I was working with people last winter to oppose this particular bill, I focused mostly on just data for the state of Arkansas, but I came across a database that really had information on crimes on college campuses across the entire United States, all 50 states plus the District of Columbia. And I promised myself during the winter that when things wound down at the end of the spring semester, I'd take some time to go back and try to gather up all that data and take a look at it. Because I was really curious to see what was happening elsewhere in the United States on college campuses as well. And I wanted to compare what may really be happening with what I think the perception that was being put out there about the nature of crime on our college campuses was during the spring semester. I wanted to see how accurate that really was. I just wanted to find out, is this really true what they're saying, or is it not true, and how far from being not true or true is it? And so I'm going to start walking through this. I'm going to start off this talk really with just an overview of what this current situation is in the United States on the whole. I don't think I have to tell you all, if you have any sense of awareness at all, that the United States of America is a nation that is awash in guns. At the present time, there is approximately 101 guns in private hands for every 100 people in the United States. There are more guns in the country than there are actual people. In 2010, that broke down like this. An estimate from the Congressional Research Service indicated there were 114 million handguns, 110 million rifles, 86 million shotguns, for a total of 310 million guns in private hands in the United States, in a population of 308 million people. I don't know how many guns you think you need to have, but some of those guns have no hands to hold them.
Everybody's got two.
Okay, so not everybody. Some people don't have 2 guns. So in 2012, we don't have any idea how many guns are sold in any given year because there's no tracking procedure and there's no regulation to do so. We do have some proxy data that are of interest, but we can't really derive much from that. During 2012, the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System, the NICS, processed 19,592,303 background checks for individuals wishing to purchase guns in the United States. Okay? Of that number, the NICS approved 19,503,824 of those people to go ahead and purchase those guns. That is a mere 0.45% rejection rate on background checks for anyone wishing to purchase guns, which seems remarkably small to me, but that is what the number actually is. We don't know how many of those approved background checks actually went through and completed their transaction, but we assume if someone goes to the trouble to get a background check, they're in a gun store and they're trying to buy a gun, and the background check comes back and approves it, they carry out that transaction. But one thing we don't know is that you can buy multiple guns for a single background check. If you're in a gun store and you have 10 guns, if your gun background check comes out and it's okay, you can buy all 10. We don't know how many people buy one gun versus multiple guns in any given transaction. And we also don't know how many people buy guns at gun shows or engage in private transactions for guns across the United States. Those are things you probably heard about in the last year, the gun show loophole and the private transaction loophole. That was the focus of efforts to include universal background checks for all gun transactions. So we at least had some idea of who was trying to buy guns around the United States. But there is no registry for guns. We still wouldn't know how many guns people were trying to buy. You can buy multiple guns for a single background check. And so we have really no information whatsoever on the total number of guns purchased in 2012 or any other year in the United States. But we do know that there are more guns in the country in private hands than there are people. And the guns are proliferating faster than the people are. Okay?
Well, that's a good thing.
You think?
That the people aren't proliferating as fast as
So, in a nation that's awash with guns, then it shouldn't come as any surprise to anyone that we're actually drowning in gun violence. And just exactly how much gun violence is that? It's a lot, as it turns out. Okay, every single year in the United States, over 100,000 people get shot. Of those people who get shot, 30,000 of them are killed. Of those 30,000 who are killed, more than 19,000 of them commit suicide or are shot accidentally or negligently, maybe more accurately to put that. And more than 11,000 are murdered. Gun deaths in the United States cut across every single demographic. There is no group in the United States that is immune from gun violence, from infant children all the way up to senior citizens, no matter what your race, creed, color, religious affiliation. Everybody in the United States is affected by gun violence. No one is spared. Okay, since 2001, so many Americans were killed in acts of gun violence. It is as if we eliminated every single resident of Manchester, Connecticut, Kingman, Arizona, Key West, Florida, Highland Park, Illinois, Valparaiso, Indiana, Mason City, Iowa, Gloucester, Massachusetts, Albert Lee, and Brainerd, Minnesota, Kearney, Nebraska, Williamsport, Pennsylvania, Waxahachie, Texas, Petersburg, Virginia, Englewood, Colorado, and Poughkeepsie, New York. Imagine those residents of those cities simply disappearing, because that's actually what happened in the last 12 years in the United States. From 2009 to September 2013, which was the Washington Navy Yard mass shooting that took place, there were 93 mass shootings in the United States. A mass shooting is defined as a single incident where 4 or more people are killed. Okay? That's almost 2 mass shootings per month over that 4-year period.
So why isn't 3?
4 is the number that was chosen by consensus. That's just, that's how they measure mass shootings. So it's time that we admit that 21st century America is actually a mass shooting in progress every day. Every day in the United States, 286 people are shot, and 86 of them die. Of those 86 people who die, 51 commit suicide by gun, 32 are murdered by guns, 2 others are killed in negligent shootings, and 1 of them shot by police. I like this phrase here: in our shining city on a hill, those 1,000 points of light are muzzle flashes. Right? And there's a lot of truth to that particular statement. Now I'm going to step back from kind of the horror story there. I want to engage us all here in just a simple thought experiment. Let's just walk our way through this and see what we think might happen. Let's try to imagine, if you will, a nation that's awash with guns and drowning in gun violence. Try to get that picture in your mind. Got that picture yet? If you've been paying attention, I hope you have that picture right now. Okay? Now let's take that nation awash in guns and drowning in gun violence, and let's imagine that we create an archipelago where guns are prohibited. And all the residents of that archipelago are defenseless against the surrounding gun-ridden society. Let that experiment run for a couple decades, because it would be lots of fun to do. There's no IB approval. There's no opt-out. There's no informed consent. It's one of the more unethical experiments on humans you could probably do, but let's think about doing it. And examine the results. What do you think would happen? What would it look like at the end? Would the defenseless have been overrun and overwhelmed by the gun-ridden society that surrounds them and completely victimized by that gun violence? What would that society look like? What do you think? What's that?
Do they have a police force?
Sure, why not? We can play that game. Sure. They have a police force. There's a police force everywhere, right?
There's going to be a lot fewer violent deaths.
So, well, let's think about it, okay? Here's the grand experiment. We already did it. It's on. That experiment is underway right now in the United States. It's been on for many decades in the United States. We have, within this gun-ridden United States society, set aside these archipelagos where guns are prohibited. They're university and college campuses, most of them across the United States. So do we have any results from this experiment yet? Well, we do have some results, I think. They're sitting in this room. Okay? I went to college for 4 years as an undergraduate, and the college I went to while I was there, no shots were fired. I went on to get a master's degree at another college, and the time during which I was at that college, no shots were fired. I went on to get a PhD at another university. At the time I was there, no shots were fired. I did a postdoc for 2 years at another university. No shots were fired during the time that I was there. I taught as a sabbatical replacement for a year at another university. No shots were fired while I was there. I came to the University of Arkansas in 1996. No shots were fired here until the first day of fall semester 2000. And some of you in this room I know remember that day probably better than I do and know the victim better than I did. But since that time, no shots have been fired on this campus. Right? And most of you have the same experience. Whatever colleges you've gone to in your life, for the most part, no shots were fired at that place. Yet the society that surrounded you, there was all kinds of gunplay going on. And thousands of people dropping dead. Every single year. So, let's see if we have any real data. I mean, that's our impression anyway of what the world may look like. Is that our impression correct or is our impression wrong? Well, it turns out that You have seen this before. This is just a copy of the email every single one of us gets on October 1st every single year. If you're a member of the university community, you're a member of any university community anywhere in the United States, you get this email. This email is sent out in compliance with the Clery Act, which is a law that was passed originally in 1990, amended in 1998, that requires universities around the country who accept federal student aid funds to report crimes against persons and crimes against property that take place on that campus every single year. The data are reported in 4 different areas. There are crimes that occur on campus. There's a subset of on-campus crimes that are crimes that occur in on-campus housing, so dormitories or apartments that might be on the campus or under the jurisdiction of the campus. That's a subset of the on-campus murders, or on-campus crimes, public areas associated with campuses, the public areas around campuses. An example of that is Dixon Street. Comes through our campus up to Gregson Hall. It's public property. It's kind of within the jurisdiction of our campus, but it's not really our campus property per se. The roads that surround our campus, Maple Avenue, Razorback Road, Arkansas Avenue, etc., those public roads are the public property that adjoins our campus, the public areas that adjoin our campus. If someone gets run over in a crosswalk and it's a negligent homicide, that gets reported in a Clery Act. Okay? And then there's non-campus facilities, such as Greek houses. Some universities, that Greek houses may be off campus, but they're kind of sort of managed by the university, but not really, or remote classroom sites of some kind. Okay, those are the data that are required to be reported in the Clery Act, and they're required to report violent crimes, crimes against people, or a broad spectrum of property crimes. Now, for the rest of my talk here today, I'm really just going to focus on one aspect of the Clery data, and it's homicides. And there's a couple of reasons why I chose that, and I'll tell you what that is for me. But here's the database. You can go get it. The Clery Act data is available online from the Department of Education, the Office of Post-Secondary Education. They have this website called the Campus Safety and Security Data Analysis Cutting Tool. If you just Google Clery Act data, the first thing that comes up is a link to this particular site. Yes, sir?
So these data do not include university students that may have been shot and killed but living in an apartment somewhere around the campus.
That's
Only
correct.
includes campus property.
That's correct. That's right. Yeah. What happens?
We have had a student or two lost, I believe,
That's right.
gunfire in the apartment.
That's right. Out in the community, that's not under the jurisdiction of the university. They're out in the general public. And what's important to understand about that is when students leave the college campus, they assume the same risk any other member of the general public would assume out in the general public. And quite honestly, college students do get murdered out in the general public, and particularly in their age group. The dominant college age group, 18 to 22-year-olds, are the people in our country who are most likely to be victimized by gun violence, and partly because they engage in risky behaviors. College kids are out late at night, they're out at bars and nightclubs, they're maybe in seedy parts of town, they engage in recreational drug use, which puts them in contact with people who have some unsavory habits. And so that particular age group is the demographic that is the most prone to gun violence in the United States. But they're not the most prone to gun violence on college campuses. And I'll show you that data in just a minute. Okay? So you can go look at these data. They're available for all 50 states and District of Columbia. The digital data they have online right now is 2001 through 2012. They just recently posted the 2012 data in the last month or so. And you can use these data to compare the rate of on-campus crimes in general to crime data from the U.S. at large, from other data sources. The FBI maintains crime data from the general public in something called the Uniform Crime Reporting System. That data is also available online, freely downloadable. Anybody can access it and download all of it, dump it in a spreadsheet, and do whatever you want to do with it. Okay? It's all there to be had. The experiment, we did it. We gathered the data. The data's out there. Nobody looked at it. It's quite remarkable. Okay, so I mentioned I'm going to spend the rest of my talk focusing only on homicides and non-negligent manslaughter incidents that occurred on campus. And there's a reason for that. Aggravated assaults, are reported in Clery data, they're probably grossly underreported. There's probably a lot of fights that occur on campus in dorm rooms and fraternity houses and bars and restaurants and things like that that probably don't get reported to the police just because the participants don't report it, right? Their sexual assaults are reported in the Clery data, probably grossly underreported as they are throughout all of our society. So you can draw something from those data, understand that there are sexual assaults that take place on college campuses. They're not as frequent as they are out in the general public. But again, being underreported, we don't necessarily know what that degree of underreporting is. I chose homicides and non-negligent manslaughter incidents simply because you can't hide a body. These data are pretty accurate, I'm pretty sure, because if somebody gets killed, someone somewhere is looking for that person eventually. If they don't find them, it gets found out that they're dead, right? So you just can't hide a murder. And so I focus on these partly because I thought these were the most relevant or the most accurate data, but they're also the most relevant for what we're talking about because the whole purpose of Act 226 was to allow people to arm themselves and defend themselves against a presumed shooter who was going to kill them anyway and commit homicide. And you get to have a chance to commit homicide first in self-defense. Okay? So I focused on that. And I've kind of chosen, it's a testable hypothesis, I think. I mean, I can say, let's look at the number of gun homicides on college campuses and let's examine whether or not those are different from the rates of gun homicides or even the volume of guns homicides that you see out in the general public. And we can ask that question, and we have the data. We can look at that. We can make comparisons. What does that data actually look like if we went through and did it? Well, here's what it looks like. Okay, from 2001 to 2012, across the United States, there were 192,456 homicides, which translates to an annual, a homicide rate of about 5.3 homicides per 100,000 people, which is relatively high for industrialized countries. Not the highest in the world by any stretch, but it's relatively high. But at university and college campuses, for the same time interval, there are exactly 202 homicides that took place. Yes?
I feel like I'm arguing against my interest, but...
Go ahead.
Anybody could argue that there are other factors that are not accounted for, that a college or university population is distinctly different than your whatever is outside. I just wonder about...
Well, in what way? I mean, that's a fair question. In what way do you feel like they're different?
Okay, I'm just thinking you could argue class, you could argue race, you could argue... I'm not sure what other factors, but I just wanted to throw that out to you.
Okay. Well, let me share this with you then. If we look at the dominant age group of college, 18 to 22-year-olds, in the general public, 18 to 22-year-olds have a homicide rate of something on the order of 20 per 100,000. On college campuses, it's 0.0056 per 100,000.
And there's nothing about most college campuses that keep other people from coming onto the campus.
That's correct. Guns are prohibited on college campuses. The prevalence of guns on college campuses is far less than the prevalence of guns out in the general public. And I'd say that's the main difference societally that you're seeing here, is that where there's no guns, there's no murders. Well, there's not really no murders, right? There's some, but there's not very many. That's over a 12-year period, 202 murders total across the entire United States. Every single college, every 4-year college, every 2-year college, every technical institute that reports data to the Clery in compliance with the Clery Act, that's all the murders there were.
There are still altercations on campuses that are disagreements.
Well, there's aggravated assaults.
The outcome of those altercations is not someone getting shot, whereas
Or killed at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, those are aggravated assaults, right? But those aggravated assaults they're lower on college campuses than they are in the general public as well. I mean, college campuses, generally speaking, are pretty tranquil places.
Are those 202 all firearm homicides?
No, good point, Malcolm. Okay, from 2000 to 2012, there are 7,894 unique reporting institutions in the Clery database. And those 7,894 institutions reported 155 individual incidents of homicide on their campuses, roughly 13 incidents per year. 202 total people were killed. 111 of those, just over 50%, 55%, were actually gun homicides. The rest of them were stabbings, beatings, and strangulations for the most part. A couple oddball things there, or a couple of drug overdoses that were alleged to be purposeful. And there were a couple of other really kind of horrible things. Young women giving birth to babies and abandoning them in trash bins and things like that. But only about half, or just over half, of the homicides on campus are caused by guns. So almost an equal number of them are caused by some other thing. Right? And of the gun homicides, 32 of them occurred at Virginia Tech in a single incident in 2007, and another 8 of them occurred, or excuse me, another 5 of them occurred in 2008 at Northern Illinois University. So 37 of those 111 are just 2 events. Most of the other homicides are single murders. They're targeted killings. An individual came on campus looking for a particular individual, frequently as a male looking for a female. When the male found the male shot the female and then shot himself. They're murder-suicides, which is what most murders are out in the world beyond college campuses as well. It's intimate partner violence, mostly. And I think if you begin to understand that that's the nature of murder on college campuses, that changes the way that you're going to try to address this as a problem. You're not looking for Adam Lanza or Cho to come on and shoot the whole campus up and take out a bunch of people. You've got to profile the personality that is basically a stalker and comes on campus looking for an individual person, and when they find that person, they take that person down and then they shoot themselves. You know, it's a completely different. What's that?
In 2000 here, it was not intimate partner, but it was a grad student shooting at one professor and then taking his own.
That's exactly right. That's exactly, and there's no evidence, I don't think. I mean, I don't know all the details of that event, but I don't think there's any evidence that he had an intention to come and shoot up the whole campus. He went looking for a single person, and once he found that person, shot him, and then shot himself. It's exactly the pattern that you see nationwide. What's that?
I believe it was his fault.
Okay. Did he? Yeah. Okay.
He obviously decided not to pursue it. The other man was this. But there is a risk.
All right. So this is the nature of yes, Byron.
So what about student violence, not gun violence? It doesn't happen very frequently.
It's not very frequent. I mean, some of these are student violence. I mean, some of this is, right? But it's, you know, again, they're mostly single homicides. They're one person gets shot. Some of them are accidental. You know, there's gunplay somewhere, and a gun discharges and kills somebody. Or really, they're not accidental. They're more negligent, I think. You know, it's not an accident. You're playing around with the gun and it discharges. You're not handling the gun properly, right? So it's negligence. But they're mostly single murders. I mean, almost all of those 111, you know, except for the 37 minus 111, 65 of them or so are single murders. It's a targeted killing. Someone coming on campus looking for another person, and when they find them, they kill them. And they're not random events. The victim knows the assailant in about 65% of the cases. So it's a totally different dynamic than I think has been presented. And quite honestly, you know, I mean, I personally, the first one would say it's a tragedy that there's been 200 murders on colleges in 12 years. But when you look at what's going on in the world around it, it's hard to argue that there's a real public safety problem on college campuses with respect to this particular crime. The public safety problem is out beyond the boundaries of our universities. And there's many, like you said, there's many causes and reasons for that, for sure.
How many universities actually prohibit anybody having a gun on campus?
Almost all of them. There's only a few dozen colleges in the United States that permit guns on campus. State of Utah passed a law in 2003-2005 that allowed anyone with a concealed carry permit to carry on campus. So students, faculty, or staff can carry. Last year, state of Colorado was forced by court order to permit concealed carry on their college campuses. And I will note that in Colorado, it took exactly 77 days for a gun incident to take place when a staff member carrying a concealed weapon at the University of Colorado Dental School discharged her weapon and injured herself and a coworker in the office.
We had that at KUAF. So.
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. We had that last year here too.
When they're allowed to have concealed carry, is it also required that, say, faculty will have a training period, and what is that training period? Because that's something I've been really concerned about.
Yeah, no, I mean, when these laws are enacted in the states that have allowed concealed carry on campuses, they only have to abide by the concealed carry law of the state, whatever that may be. I mean, it varies from state to state. The requirements for concealed carry vary from place to place and what's necessary. But as long as you are licensed to carry in the state, you can carry. There's no requirement for special training of any kind or additional training or urban warfare training or anything like that. You can carry if you're qualified to carry according to state law. You can carry in those states. Some other states, in Colorado and Utah, carry is required. It's legal to carry concealed carry at universities in Oregon, but individual universities can decide for themselves whether they want to permit it or not. Same is true in Wisconsin. Concealed carry is permitted, but individual campuses can decide for themselves whether they want to permit or not. I think Mississippi last year also enacted law to permit concealed carry on campus of all their colleges and universities in Mississippi. Yes, Sid.
That's prosecute, agreement between states too.
For concealed carry.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Concealed carry, license here, you can go to Utah, and carry it.
Right.
Well, where concealed carry laws require training, the training is usually just a joke.
Well, it's pretty minimal. I mean, it's usually an 8-hour session, learning about the laws of concealed carry and having some discussion, I think, about use of lethal force and when that's appropriate or not. And then a couple-hour period of training at a shooting range, and you usually have to demonstrate you can aim your gun and hit a target 10 feet away or something like that. It's not very rigorous at all.
And Virginia is completely online.
That's fantastic.
What do? Use a weed?
Watch out for the bullets coming out of the
Go through
screen.
the training program and you take an online test, which you can probably pass now. And you get your license. There is not a single training program in the country that the military is.
So, and then interestingly, in the same database, in 2001-2012, there are actually 14 states that have not reported an on-campus homicide by any cause over the entire period that the database is available. So you have Alaska, Hawaii, Kansas, Minnesota, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, South Dakota, Utah, and Vermont. No homicides in 12 years. Now, interestingly, Utah is a state that permits concealed carry. They passed that law in 2000 through 2004. There have not been any homicides on campuses since that law was passed. But there weren't any before it passed either. So what was the public safety criterion or motivation to pass that law? I would argue there was no public safety motivation to pass that law. That law had something to do with a different mindset altogether. Had nothing to do with keeping anybody safe. There was no call for it of anything.
Kept somebody's legislative job safe.
Maybe. And then here at home in Arkansas, 2001, 2012, we have actually recorded 4 murders. 2 at University of Central Arkansas in 2008, 1 at Arkansas State University in 2010, and last year 1 person was killed at Arkansas Baptist College in Little Rock. But that's it. I don't believe any have occurred in 2013, but we don't have 2013 data yet, and 2013 not over either. So fingers crossed. You know, we may avoid gun violence in Arkansas this year. And if you calculate, if you look at this number of murders over the last 12 years, assume that these students are members of the general public at large, the actual calculated rate of homicide for students in Arkansas is 0.0001 per 100,000 persons. It's 53,000 times lower than the observed homicide rate for a person out in the general public in the United States, which is 5.3. It's a remarkably low rate of gun violence. And again, I'd emphasize the dominant age group that we're dealing with here, 18 to 22 years, that is the age group that is most prone to gun violence. And on our campuses in Arkansas, it's the safest refuge they could possibly find from gun violence. I think those who would introduce guns into this particular environment are a little misguided about what's really taking place across our campus and what the phenomenon of college homicide really looks like. And I think they need to be educated about that. It's why we're here in this room. It's why Sigma Xi, the Scientific Research Society, sponsors talks like this. So finally, homicides in college campuses are very rare or non-existent. 14 states have recorded no homicides in 12 years. The other states have a handful individually per year. When in those same states, there are thousands of people dropping dead from guns out in the general public. Okay? There doesn't appear to me to be a public safety issue on college campuses relative to the U.S. public at large. We're so much safer on these campuses than being outside the campus boundaries. We should all stay here all the time, to be honest about it. Yeah, here you go. And finally, you know, we had some folks in the state last year who claimed that gun-free college campuses were magnets for murderers. Okay, they are not magnets for murderers; they are sanctuaries from them. The data shows very conclusively that if you want to avoid becoming a victim of gun violence, go to college and stay there as long as you can. Okay. And so that, I think, concludes my talk. It does. And so I guess we open up to questions. We have time for questions.
Who is this who's claiming that college campus, gun-free college campuses are magnets for murder?
Now, who do you think? He's a local representative from Fayetteville. There you go.
Charlie.
That's it.
He's the guy that introduced it.
That's
So
correct.
why did Charlie, what was Charlie's rationale for introducing it?
He thinks colleges without guns are magnets for murderers. That's his rationale. He's my neighbor. Can't talk to the guy. You know, I have no idea what he thinks. You know, no time. Yes, Gwen.
Have there been surveys among students asking them how they feel about guns on campus?
Yes, there have been. And it depends on the state. Generally speaking, college students as a group are opposed to guns in general. I mean, the millennial generation are not interested in owning guns. They have pretty low rates of gun ownership for the most part, of course. But, you know, it depends what state you're in. If you go to Wyoming, students don't care. You know, they probably have guns in their cars anyway, rifles in their gun racks in their pickup truck and all that stuff.
How about here?
In Arkansas, it was as far as I know, and I don't know how accurate the survey was. I don't know the condition survey, but it's kind of, you know, there are more students opposed to guns than are for it, but it's not a wide gulf between them. It's maybe, I don't know, 56 to 44 or something like that. You know, but I don't know the conditions of those surveys. They're kind of informal surveys that have been done. But the majority of our students on campus opposed Act 226. The ASG did pass resolutions last year opposing the bill when it was HB 1243 before it got passed into law, and said they were opposed to allowing concealed carry on campus. So a majority of our students were in favor of keeping our campus gun-free.
Though there are a number of students who don't realize that our campus is supposed to be gun-free because having sat on the J board for 6 years, there, at least once or twice a year, we'd have somebody who was up on a possession offense.
Yeah,
Where
well,
they had a hunting rifle in the trunk of their car parked in a campus lot and didn't realize.
that was not allowed, right. Yeah, and to be sure that takes place, and again, we have an open campus. There's nothing really to stop someone from bringing a gun on our campus. We got signs around campus that don't do that, and somehow that
Those
works.
really work.
Somehow that works. I mean, by and large. I mean, I have no doubt if you went out and sort of searched every backpack on campus, you would find people with guns in their backpacks, for sure.
Where are the signs?
There's no doubt.
Where are the signs?
What's that? They're around the perimeter of campus. There's one I know there's one on Dixon Street right by Arkansas Avenue, right by the corner. There's one out there when you come onto the entrance of campus on Razorback Road. I think there's a couple here on Maple Street as you come up Leverett.
There's
and
more
some
around
other
the
streets.
football stadium than there are around.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they're out and about. They're not very big signs. They're kind of innocuous. They have a little gun with a circle and a slash through it. So don't bring a gun on campus. But they're around.
Probably say something, don't bring guns or drugs or.
No, I think it just says firearms prohibited or something like that. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Steve, did you
Oh.
say? Excuse me,
I'm sorry.
Richard, I didn't see you.
Go ahead, Richard.
Did you say you had a copy of this online for us, or will have?
Doug just recorded this, and I guess it's still recording. So, yes.
It'll be posted on the Sigma's Eye website. And if you don't know how to find the Sigma's Eye website, look up in the alphabetical listing for the campus. Sigma's Eye is a registered organization at the university. So under S, Sigma's Eye, not Sigma Chi, the fraternity.
Right. Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, just was remembering a study that I read about 20 years ago or more that said that over 80% of people who were killed in their home were killed by a gun that lived in that home.
That's correct.
And just kind of makes you wonder why people think having a gun in your home makes you safer.
That's right. No,
And it's different than what you're doing, but I think it's related to the
right. No,
general way of thinking.
right. No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, guns in the home are a leading cause of death in the home around the United States. And you can go Google. I've been doing this for a year now. Every single morning I Google accidental shootings and just see how many people got an accidental shooting, and they're all in their homes, and they're mostly kids. There's no demographic that is immune. Men cleaning their gun shoot their wife, or so they say. I mean, it's remarkable. Every single day, there's new ones on there. It never fails. I mean, I can go every single day and look on Google first thing in the morning, and there's someone got shot in their house overnight with a gun that they own. Sometimes it's a shotgun, sometimes it's a rifle, sometimes it's a pistol. It's like any gun they have, they will shoot themselves with that gun sooner or later, it seems. It's just amazing to me.
Which state has the highest rate of gun ownership?
Highest rate of gun ownership, I think probably Wyoming. I don't know that for a fact, but it's a small state, small population. Most people there have a gun. So in terms of percentage of people who own a gun, it's probably Wyoming.
Texas is pretty high.
Yeah, Texas. I'd say Texas is very high, and I'd say Louisiana is probably pretty high too.
In
I mean,
Arkansas, I would expect.
yeah.
One thing that struck me, this is slightly unrelated, but it's related as well. A year or so ago, in the same book I mentioned last week, the same week, there was an article in the paper about a person who had mental issues in China who went into an elementary school with the intent to kill lots of people, but all he had access to was
A knife. Right.
And no one died. A couple of the students were in critical condition. But the difference is guns are more lethal
Correct.
than all of these other means by which you can kill someone.
That's right. That's right.
And then just, there's two different societies, both huge modern societies. One doesn't have access to guns everywhere, the other one does. And I found those two articles in the paper just in stark contrast.
Yeah, no, that's
They were
absolutely.
both awful articles.
No, it's absolutely right. And the real people who study gun violence, people like David Hemingway at the Harvard School of Public Health, who has spent his entire career studying gun violence and a lot of different aspects of it. They'll tell you that guns in the home, people with guns in the home are much more successful committing suicide than people trying to commit suicide with any other kind of weapon. Guns are lethal. I mean, you shoot yourself in the head with a gun, you're probably not going to survive. try to stab yourself or slit your wrist or something, people don't seem to know how to do that very well. And it's not, it's not as immediate either. And so, most of the suicide deaths in the United States are gun suicides. Many of the homicides in the United States are gun homicides. There are some states where gun homicides actually exceed the number of people killed in car accidents.
I think that happened in Colorado this year.
Yep. I think Utah as well.
Anybody need any other questions answered on Dead Day?
For that uplifting presentation.
Friday the 13th, Dead Day, the eve of Sandy Hook. What?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you all for being here today. Thank you all.